mostly just trying to get people to understand that there is intrinsic value in having something very, very special that is unique and almost irreplaceable. Because I don't think there will ever be another rock house in Turks and Caicos. It was that hard. And to raise the kind of capital and have the kind of support from your equity partners that gave you time to get through that war, right? With them giving up, when the lender's not giving up and everybody's saying, let's just keep driving, keep pushing this, and eventually the thing will turn into a snowball if we keep pushing it down the hill, right? Yeah. It'll get the momentum. And that was the beauty of rock houses, that nobody gave up.
So episode 44 of the Deal Ranch podcast. We've got a great guest and we're in a great place. Quinn PR set this up, so really excited. But Mark Durliat, so CEO and co-founder of Grace Bay Resorts. You guys are a premier hospitality leader and development and hospitality operator in Turks and Caicos. So I'm really excited to sit down and finally get this one scheduled. This is going to be great.
It's good to be here. Thanks, Matt. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So what would be the best intro on yourself, and then could you give kind of like a, to set the tone for the conversation, the best overview of Grace Bay Resorts? Because you guys do so much down there and it's so cool, but I want to hear in your own words. Like, what's the best summarization of the company in modern time?
I guess the best way to talk about Grace Bay Resorts is to say we've been in Turks and Caicos over two decades. Mm-hmm. Started in 2001. We are a company consisting of 5 operating hotels, condo hotels, now mostly residential hotels. We have about 950 employees in the country. Started out as 40 employees, and now we're 950. Our initial revenue stream when we started was about $4 million. We're up to about $107 million this year. Of the five operating resorts, we have 300 residential homes under our management, which consist of about 400 keys in total. Total assets under management are roughly around just a little over $1 billion in total value. And that's kind of a summary of where we are right now.
I think it's a good place to start. Yeah. So when I was doing a little bit of research, we can go back in time because I think that'll be the best way to tell your story and the evolution of what drove you to the Caribbean, and then the evolution of kind of deal by deal, how you've built the company and provided a lot of employment to a lot of people. So there's a story somewhere about you meeting Gary Player, which I played golf in college, so I was drawn to that. Yeah. So how did you get interested in, was it hospitality to start? Was it real estate development? What was your story post-college?
Well, I went to school in Los Angeles, at the University of Southern Cal, and studied French, and I was a little bit restless, and so I moved to France right out of college and lived and worked in France for quite a while. And while I was there, I decided sometime along the path, about 2 years into it, that I wanted to get into the real estate business. And by happenstance, I managed to be introduced to a UK developer who had a partnership with Gary Player.
Oh, wow.
That's really interesting that you know Gary, because there are so many people who don't.
Yeah.
So my way to describe him is the Jack Nicklaus of South Africa.
That's a good
And then
line.
people get it, right? Or the Tiger Woods of South Africa, depending on your era, right? Yeah. And so Gary Player was, like Nicklaus, a designer of golf courses, mostly in Europe and Asia. So he was a celebrity in that world, and he had some partners that they were building this golf residential community in Belgium, in the French-speaking part of Belgium. So I somehow managed to meet this UK developer and convinced him that I had what it took to understand what they were trying to accomplish, which was largely a U.S. country club sort of mindset, a master plan golf community with hotel, residential, and golf course around it. And Gary was the designer. So I managed to convince them to hire me. And so that was my first foray into real estate development. So I was hired by the developer to be on the team. And
what were you doing on the team?
You name it. I mean, we were an entrepreneurial thing. It was very much sort of a high net worth, sort of capitalized project. And I was you name it. It was marketing, sales, development, construction, fundraising, architecture, engineering, sales. And ultimately, when we finally opened the hotel, it opened the golf club, I was managing the golf club. So I did it all. And just, you name it, I was just learning along the way. And so that lasted about 4 years, and about that time, I started to get restless again. I felt it was time that I wanted to branch out. So I sat down and had dinner with Gary Player one night, and we got to know each other over the years. And I just said, Gary, give me your advice. What do you think? And he's obviously pushing 70 by this time, and he's as fit as a fiddle. But his advice meant something. And so he said, listen, Mark, this was 95, and Mandela had just become president of South Africa.
Oh.
Just been elected. And he said, in South Africa, there's going to be some real opportunities for entrepreneurship. Why don't you check it out? I said, okay. Will you make a few introductions? And he said he would. And so I basically packed up and moved to Cape Town in 1995 and started again. And with a couple of introductions, I started the plan to sort of roll out what we have now. Wow. So that's how it happened. That's how Gary Player and I got to know each other. He was the architect. I did all the work around the project. I was working for the developer. And I kind of learned the ins and outs of real estate development in the European way with the sort of a U.S. sort of model. But that's how it happened.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
So in Cape Town, what were the projects and how long did you spend there, kind of cutting your teeth and being in the kind of formal development seat for all those years?
It's about 5 years in Cape Town. Okay. And that was basically considered the Wild West. South Africa was a Wild West in my respect, is sort of my experience, because
along the lines of engineering or
no,
architecture?
it was just in that the rules were changing. There was just obviously the entire universe in South Africa changed, right? It went from what it was to now all of a sudden this person who's been in prison for 27 years is now running the country, and so the world was just seeing it in a different light. There was all this kind of interest in the destination, and so hotel development became a thing. It was really, but there was no money. So we immediately had to go into the condo hotel market because the only way there's the only way you could raise the capital. So I started with, what happened was Gary made a few introductions, and a couple of these gentlemen that I met were 30 years my senior, and I said, I have a simple plan. I'll do all the work. Mm-hmm. I'll find the deals. I'll put together the deals. I'll put together the plans, and I'll run the projects, but I need you to help me raise money. Simple. Right? And so one of them said, that sounds good. So we started out buying these stately old homes in these beautiful neighborhoods and renovating these beautiful homes and turning them into mansions, and ultimately started converting some of them into bed and breakfasts and selling those to Europeans. And ultimately we started taking over apartment buildings in Cape Town and converting those to condo hotels.
Really?
And at the time, there was no way to raise money. You couldn't raise any financing, traditional financing for those types of properties. So what we would do is we'd go out to the market, and this is where the Wild West piece came in. You could go out to the buying market. You could actually advertise this. You could say that your occupancy was going to be X, and your rate's going to be Y, and therefore your yield is going to be Z or Z. Yep. You could just say that, and you could advertise it openly, as if you were selling a security.
No kidding.
And so you could fiddle with those rates and the occupancy as you wished to change your price.
Wow.
Yeah, it was nuts. And so,
wow.
So the competition was fierce just doing that. So you just saw people changing things arbitrarily just to get a higher price and then sell the real estate on the basis that you, Mr. Buyer, from Johannesburg or Durban, wherever we were selling it from, those customers would come down and buy this real estate. And the idea was that they have a place to stay in Cape Town, but they would have this yield generated by the hotel. That was the trick, right? That was the key to selling the real estate. Mm-hmm. The problem was that we had to have these relationships with these buyers. So it was a one-on-one, and I was selling this real estate, and all of a sudden, as the hotels were starting to open, we had to run them. And so this is the part where I learned hospitality management. So we weren't branded. We didn't have any management company we could call and come in. So we actually had to take over the management. And so that's when I started bringing hospitality talent and learning the art of hospitality management.
Interesting.
So that's really a little bit of the story of how I got into condo hotel development.
I didn't know that.
In Cape Town.
So a couple questions on that. That actually makes plenty of sense. That was one of my biggest questions, is how did you get introduced to that product? Because some bit it is a niche. Like in the States, there's a lot of really great condo hotel operators, but certainly not everyone does it. So in South Africa, when you were doing that, was there the idea of a front desk component like people have in the States here, where they buy the front desk fee simple and then they're kind of have this like competitive advantage to be the management? Or was it, hey, if you buy one, you guys are the manager? Like, well, there wasn't Airbnb then, I guess, right? No. So how did management work? Like, were you the guaranteed manager?
We were the 100% the manager. There was no option. You bought
cool.
from us and you bought from our management company, and invariably you were tied in with us. So if we failed at the hotel management role, there could be a big risk for you, clearly, but that was the way it worked.
What were the hardest times in operating those projects? What did you learn that you kind of implemented later? What do you think was the biggest grind of getting that model up and running in South Africa?
Well, I think the biggest grind ultimately became the relationship business part, where we were saying, because the market pushed us into being aggressive on pricing and aggressive on yield targets or yield expectations, you had to face those customers eventually because they bought real estate when it didn't, right? Because you needed lots of occupancy and lots of rate, you needed lots of compression in the market to achieve those rates, and if it wasn't happening immediately, then people got a little restless. So managing that process was really was tough. We managed it fine, but it was tough initially because I think expectations were very high. That was one of the biggest challenges. The other was just really learning at the coalface the hospitality operation. You know, I was a developer. I'm a developer. That's what I wanted to be, and so I had to force myself to learn it. So I brought in talent from the hotel brands to help me build the management company.
Interesting.
And they taught me the hospitality business.
Wow. Okay, so then transitioning to Turks, at what point did you decide, hey, I want to, because obviously you didn't know it was Turks from what I read in your story. It was like, hey, I want to do something maybe in the Caribbean. What led you to that kind of, what's the next chapter in this story here? How did it evolve?
The next chapter was about late 1999, early 2000. I decided to come back to the U.S. I decided I'd been abroad long enough and decided I wanted to start my own real estate career back in the U.S., where I'm obviously originally from.
Where did you move back to in the States?
Back to Miami.
Okay, cool.
It was the closest place. We knew that there was some South African interest in southern Florida, so we thought maybe we could draw some South African capital back into Florida because of the relationships that I built there. And ultimately, as I was going through the sort of the bird dogging of deals in southern Florida, I met the developer of Esperanza in Cabo San Lucas, and he was building that property at the time, and I somehow persuaded him to bring me on his team. And he said, here's what I want you to do. Go find deals that may allow us to emulate this kind of concept, which was a boutique hotel with some residential around it, world-class locations, very high-end, very much a handmade product. So I went out and basically scoured the Caribbean for about 10 months under his employ. And ultimately what happened was, the coolest thing was, not him, but I met this finance guy who was probably about 65, 70 years old in California, and he somehow knew the Caribbean pretty well. Interesting. And so he said to me, you know, strangely, I accidentally landed in the Turks and Caicos once because my plane had to land because there was a storm, and so we had to stop in Turks for a while.
This is you or him?
Him talking to me. And I'm looking around the Caribbean. I'm trying to figure out where the deals are. We've been to St. Bart's, Cayman, Bahamas, St. Martin, Antigua, Anguilla works. And ultimately, he said, you know, I accidentally stopped there. I don't know why it was. I just felt like there was some potential. You should check it out. And I said, where? Right?
Yeah.
Like everybody, where is the Turks and who? The Caicos and what?
Exactly.
Where is this, right? So I had to look it up. I learned that that American Airlines had a single flight going down there a couple times a week. And so I got on the plane and checked it out, flew down, completely random. And he also told me at the time, he goes, I think through these brokers in British Virgin Islands, there's this hotel called Grace Bay Club that's for sale. But I don't know, I think. And it's this little tiny hotel, and it was a member of Small Luxury Hotels of the World. So it was a little tiny 20-room hotel sitting on this incredible beach. And I said, okay, I'll go check it out. So I flew down to Turks and Caicos in early 2001. And is this where you want me to go with this?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I flew there, and I knew nothing other than I had a little bit of information about kind of the general infrastructure of the country and its laws and so forth, and it was the British overseas territory. So having lived in South Africa, that meant something to me. It sort of had some similarities. So I got there, and within 3 days, I basically did a due diligence, just a nuclear due diligence. I mean, I just went all in, and I just did everything that I could. And it started out with this one specific moment. I walked into Grace Bay Club, and I sat down at their bar. They have this round bar that's famous. I sat down, and the bartender comes up to me, and he's one of my best friends to this day, 24 years later. His name's Carlton. And he walks up to me, and he goes, what do you want to drink? And I said, maybe have a rum punch or something. I'm not sure what it was. And he says, what are you doing here? I said, well, I think we're thinking about buying a hotel in Turks and Caicos. Right? And I didn't tell him who it
Of
was.
course, yeah, yeah.
And he goes, oh yeah, that hotel behind the Grace Bay Club's for sale. You should go check that out. And little did he know that I was actually digging for information about that property. So long and short of it is, 3 days into this, I'd met with every lawyer in the country. I'd met with a government investment agency. I had talked to anybody that mattered and decided that this was it. I said, I knew it. This was the aha moment. I said, there is no more searching. And I called my boss at the time and said, we have found the spot. I'll call you when I get this deal sorted out. And that was it. I said, we're not looking anymore. This is where it's going to happen. And what had happened was that I had seen 2 or 3 projects that had been sold on the condo hotel model. And I looked at them and I said, we can do that at a much larger scale. And we can do it a lot better. And I know it. And because I know how to do that, right? So I said, great, this is it. I can make this happen. And so we basically honed all our energies in on coming to the Turks and Caicos then and there. And so that's when it started. That was the first moment in Turks and Caicos in early 2001.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what made it, if you can break it down, the decision-making criteria, one from a financial side, 2 from supporting environmental factors maybe. So what, was it an underperforming hotel? How were the financials? And also, were you looking to acquire the hotel and then sell them out as condo-tel units to kind of recapitalize your project?
Sort of.
Okay.
Basically, what it was, the person I was working for at the time, his model was, his vision was, let's find a boutique hotel that has land. And that has some kind of awareness, has some presence in the market. Maybe we can use that brand to build some residential and keep it independent. That was basically the concept. And I said, well, that makes sense. So Grace Bay Club basically fit that perfectly. They had land. So the original owner was this Swiss man. He had built a 20-room hotel, and around it had 6 acres of land.
Wow.
So we made a big deal to buy the hotel and all the land with it. And the premise was that we felt, firstly, we had to figure out whether the legal infrastructure or legal structure in Turks and Caicos made sense. How do we acquire assets? How do we acquire real estate? Do we get fee simple title? Right. How do you get title insurance? How do you finance? All the things that we normally ask. What we learned really quickly was it was fee simple. There was no restriction on foreign ownership of land in Turks and Caicos, which is a big deal. In the Bahamas there is, in Antigua there is, in other countries around the Caribbean, there are certain hurdles you have to step over to get to being approved for buying real estate in that country. Turks and Caicos, they don't have that. So you could go in, make a deal with a private seller, and you could make the deal quickly. So we got comfortable generally with the broader legal infrastructure. It was the U.S. dollar-based economy. And then we had to say to ourselves, well, if we design enough cool real estate around this one hotel, can we use the customers? Can we lure, or can we persuade the customers in the hotel to become our partners by buying a condominium from us and then being part of our condo hotel environment?
Beautiful.
So that was basically the concept. And
brilliant.
So we put together the whole deal for that, and it was all hunky-dory, and we made a deal with the seller. The problem was that there was no financing anywhere. Nobody even knew where Turks and Caicos was.
Sure.
So we were still raising money from needles in a haystack. So I remember, I would go to the high net worth investors and say, this is what we're trying to accomplish. And they'd say Turks and who, where and who, and these kind of, but there was one in particular, a guy who had stayed at the hotel before. And he got a call from a friend of a friend of a friend. He said, I'm in. And so I started using sort of his experience to kind of help sort of craft the story, and we're raising the new capital. But ultimately what happened was we had to get the seller to carry. So the seller carried some paper, big paper.
Nice.
Right? And I said,
what percentage of purchase price?
Oh, he probably carried 60%.
Whoa.
Yeah, big number.
Pretty good term,
yeah.
too. Decent.
Good. Yeah, it was 2 years with an extension for 3.
Wow.
And the reason is we couldn't go to, say, a Scotia Bank or a Citibank or a JP Morgan, anybody, and say we want to borrow 60% of the money to buy this asset. They just weren't there, and they didn't understand what we were trying to do. So we bought it with him carrying for a while. And then over the course of the next 2 years, we did 2 things. One is we rolled out the plan to do the residential, and we started selling like gangbusters. People loved the idea because it was the only one that had a core hotel attached to it. Anything else that I had seen before was just a pure condo hotel. So we had this core hotel that had something there.
Yeah.
We could build upon it. So we started selling the real estate, and then I had to raise the capital, but there was the financing, and there was just, they couldn't understand it. The lenders were Scotia, Barclays. Wow. Those were the two main lenders. RBC was a little bit in the market. And ultimately, I ended up in Trinidad, of all places. So Trinidad is this oil-rich, natural gas-rich Caribbean island just off the coast.
Venezuela,
Right,
nearby.
right off the coast of Venezuela. Very, very successful country for those reasons mostly. And they had a Caribbean mindset. And somehow I managed to stumble upon these folks about a year and a half into this thing. And we managed to raise the debt with them. And from that moment on, the entire world changed because we had been able to bring in a Caribbean lender who could understand the Caribbean sort of culture, the psyche, the variables. And we were off to the races. Wow. So we raised the money with them, and so that's what happened over the 2 years. But there's a really interesting part about this story was that during 2001, when we were negotiating with the seller, this was in April, April of 2001. We got to July. We basically had this thing under contract, money's up hard, ready to go hard at a certain point in time. We were cruising through the process, and then 9/11 happened.
Oh, wow.
So 9/11 happened, and you know what happened after that. The world just completely came to a standstill, and the deal fell apart. I lost my job.
Whoa.
Because we had this, it was a $15 million asset. It felt like the biggest deal of my life, right? It was at the time.
And it was, yeah.
And it fell apart. So 9/11 killed it all. I lost my job. The deal fell apart, and just things just went, completely quiet. And somehow I just felt that there was something there, so I didn't really let it go. For a couple of months, we just kind of kept it quiet, and then I slowly got back into communication with the seller. And I raised some money with a personal loan and basically started doing due diligence again on my own. So I went back to the seller and I said, I think that you'd be mistaken to let this go. Let me keep working on it. Give me a shot at it. I think I can put it back together. Yeah. So he agreed. And so over the course of the next 2 or 3 months, we put the deal back together. By January of the next year, I had him sign a new LOI, and we had a deal back in place. Good news was, by that time, the country was in a free-for-all. Hospitality was off the list. No one was flying anywhere. No one was staying in hotels. Yeah. Terrorism was everywhere. So the government reduced its taxes on real estate purchases by a huge figure. Like they halved them because they wanted to incentivize the international community to come in and invest in the country. So that reduced our tax burden going in, and also the seller agreed to a reduction in price because he was ready. Yeah, right? We were going to sell, and all of a sudden it stopped. So so we rekindled the deal, and then I went back to my original boss and said, I think that would be helpful if we partnered on this. So then we became partners.
Cool.
So no longer was working for him, but was working with him, and we had partnered on this deal. We raised the capital together, and then we put together the plan, which was I just spoke about a moment ago. That's the story.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Wow. So was all of that capital raised, what you outlined there, that was just for the acquisition of the hotel and the land, or was that also forward financing for the development costs of what you guys wanted to then build after that?
We raised about $15 million at the time, in some total, and that was enough to get us going on the project. And ultimately, what financed the deal was the sale of real estate.
Got it. Okay.
So we sold lots of real estate. We probably had 75% of this stuff sold before we even had the loan in place. Took us about, maybe about 12, 15 months to get to that place. And then we raised that additional financing, the construction financing. We took out the seller, and we started construction in 2003. So the financing, mostly when you have these condo hotels, if you design it well, you can limit the amount of capital going in. Certainly, to the deals we're doing now are substantially larger, but at that time we were using and just creeping along with the cash. And to coin a phrase of the original partner that I mentioned, he said to me, "I have no idea how we pulled this off. We had no money."
Wow.
That's what he said. And for me, I thought we had all the money in the world because I was young and we were going out. I was in the early 30s. And there had never been a hotel sold in Turks and Caicos of this nature. So for us, everything just seemed, everything seemed possible. It just seemed like we can do all this. We can do it. Now I look back and go, gosh, I don't know how we pulled that off. But we managed to pull it off. And it was a lot of fun because it felt like we were kind of a David and Goliath situation. Finding the debt was difficult. We had to bring in a new lender that had never lent to this country. And it really helped us to start to build the hospitality business industry in Turks and Caicos. Because this hotel was iconic, and then it became super iconic when we grew it.
That's awesome.
So how big was that first phase? So we can talk. I want to talk about your current projects too. And there's been a lot in between, and we can get through all of that. But how big was that first? Do you remember how many units were built of that first wave of condotels and residences? And then what was the sale? I know you said you did everything then, but what was the sales and marketing plan to move those units? And I guess what was the process in doing so? And who was kind of the target buyer? Because we'll get into operations of it too now, but it's not just someone, hey, I want to retire. I have money, I want to move here. It's like, hey, you also want to operate them throughout the year. So who were those target buyers initially, and then what was the plan to get those sold? And how many, if you remember the
I
total
do,
project?
of course.
Yeah.
There was the first phase was 38 units.
Cool. Single family, or was it
They were
condo?
condominiums, right?
Okay,
So we had 4 buildings, 38 units in 4 different buildings, 5-story buildings. Prices ranging from $1 million up to $2.5 million, roughly. At the time, that seemed like a fortune. Right now, that's kind of barely an entry price these days. But it was so it was 38 units in the project, and we set up a little real estate office in the hotel, and we partnered with a local real estate brokerage with a gentleman who had come from Philadelphia and been there for years, and he had formed a little real estate company with one of the Turks and Caicos Islander business families, and so we said to them, let's set this up in the office, and I'll man it with your agent, and I'll teach them what we're doing. Right. So I lived and breathed Grace Bay Club for countless hours, every day, every night, for years.
And you were there full time?
All the time.
Okay.
And so what happened was the real estate agents would get a lead, and then they'd bring them to the office, and we would sit down, and I basically made the first 30 sales with them.
Nice.
Because I needed to get them to understand what we were doing. How were they what was the risk for them? What was our commitment? How were we going to deliver on the promise?
Yeah.
All those things. And so I think that the buyers at that time, most of them were baby boomers.
Okay.
Obviously the early 2000s. So and it was all cash. So you had to find a customer who could cough up $1 million or $2 million or $1.5 million.
Wow.
Over a period of time, right? So it was they pay you as you build. It's a progress payment method, and so we had sort of a hand-to-hand combat sales process. And so I was talking to those buyers as if they were going to be partners. Partners of ours for a long time, and they are, and they were, and so we created those relationships. So the sales process evolved over time, but in the early days, there was a lot of that, and that actually still happens to a lesser extent because we're obviously spread out a lot more. But that's how it happened.
Wow!
And so that company, that real estate company, about 6 years later, became Sotheby's Turks and Caicos.
Really?
So they came to us and they said, we're thinking about bringing the Sotheby's brand here and buying it. What do you think? And I said, if you do, then we're going to stick a Sotheby's right in the hotel, in all our hotels. Because we want the co-branding. We want that familiarity. We want the credibility that brand
Premier
will bring.
brand, yeah.
So if you're a guest or you're an owner in the hotel, when you're there, you have someone to go to and get information and feel like, okay, this is a third party giving me information about the real estate market, about my real estate, about what's happening. And so that's proved to be exceptionally helpful to us.
Interesting.
So all the hotels now have a Sotheby's presence in it.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. So what happens after that? So you get one project, early 30s, it goes well. You probably feel like the top of the world. So this is when did that project finish selling out? Like 2004 or right away? 2003?
Well, we had second phase. So the first phase I mentioned was 38 units, and then we bought a bit additional adjacent land that wasn't part of the original purchase, and we paid a king's ransom for this.
Did you?
Yeah, king's ransom. At the time, it seemed like a king's ransom, but in looking back, it was probably a good deal. Yeah. So we then launched a second phase, and that was another 22 units. And so we built that over the next 2 years, and we finally finished that in late 08 to early 09. So at that moment in time, 09, we're basically completed with the Grace Bay Club.
Okay.
During that time, I was doing some residential development around the island, which wasn't associated with necessarily Grace Bay resorts, but it was creating some housing around the community because the country was growing.
Right.
And so we started creating some residential stuff. And then in 2009, what happened was of course, 2008, the world collapsed a little bit.
How did that affect, one of the questions that I think now will be a good time to put it in because it'll help me think through the rest, but what is the correlation between Turks and Caicos real estate, global real estate, and then just domestic U.S. real estate? Like, do they react in the same trends? And then also, how did 2008-9 impact your operation down there?
I would say generally they don't react in the same trends, mostly because we're all a cash buyer sort of market. So
yeah,
it's
so there's no debt market.
Right? There's very little debt. And I think that you're seeing a very high percent, the demographic is very, very well off coming to Turks and Caicos now. So they're arriving and they're saying, we want to be part of this, and we're going to pay what it takes to be part of this. Not necessarily excessively or in an exaggerated form, but certainly very smart money coming into Turks and Caicos. And so smart money is following smart money. And this is what was driving the market. But also in Turks, even though we had a boom between 2003 till 2008, well, we had quite a bit. For Turks and Caicos, it was a boom. There's quite a bit of construction happening. So Grace Bay Club was one. There were 3 other projects that happened at the time. But it wasn't like Florida and Vegas and California where you had this huge amount of development, which was funded largely by the likes of the Lehman Brothers of the world, right? A lot of debt was in the market funding these things. And incidentally, we had a proposal from Lehman Brothers back at that time to fund our project. And I'll tell you, I could talk about that.
Please.
But in any event, we didn't overbuild. So what you saw was the market just kind of, instead of doing this, what it was doing, it just kind of did this. And we just stayed steady. But the good news was people were still traveling. So we were able to deliver on the promise at the hospitality level. Nice. So the buyers from us were seeing returns on their investment and still able to use their homes. Yeah. And we were still able to create a hospitality community in Turks and Caicos. So the hospitality community continued to strengthen over that period of time. From 2008 to 2012, you basically saw no new development, but you saw the hospitality trade strengthen.
Interesting. How did, what was kind of the early, and maybe the product now is significantly different as far as yield, but like, how do most of those buyers, obviously they're cash deals, so they're obviously it's going to be a yield, but what does it look like for them to be in the program? They buy, how often, what's use like, and then how does that correspond with yield? Like, is it low single digits? Like, how much are they netting, and then how do you guys split your return? I think this will be good to think through too. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm glad you asked. Generally speaking, when somebody asks us, and this was something that I learned in South Africa. Back to the old story.
Yeah.
When somebody asks me, what's the yield going to be? I immediately am on my back. I'm immediately sort of nervous about the conversation because I feel like it's going in the wrong direction. We have to find buyers who have a desire to have a lifestyle investment. In that they see this as something that they are going to use. They, their family, their children, they're going to be able to have use and enjoyment. And generally, to answer your question in usage, it's roughly between 30 and 45 days a year as an average.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It is a lot. So go backwards. Now that's 90% of the year. It's a hotel product.
Correct.
Right. So if we're doing good rate and we're doing good occupancy, that can produce a pretty good yield to owners. But we don't focus on that. We say here's a great anecdote. 8 years after Grace Bay opened, we had this buyer. It was a couple of doctors from Michigan. They become really close friends, big divers, had young kids, and they come down once a year and they dive for 3 weeks and then they go away, and I wouldn't see them for another year, maybe once or twice again in the year. And their kids grew up at this hotel. And then ultimately he came to me and he said, his wife and he came to me and said, we're going to sell. Basically, my kids are gone to college. We think it's time for us to move on. Sold this thing and then sent me a personal note at the end and said, thank you so much for this investment. It was the best investment I've made in my entire life. And he didn't really spell out why, other than he just had fond memories of it. And that became the prototype for the ideal owner.
Absolutely.
This owner got to use it a lot. Their kids loved it. Their whole family loved it. And during that time, the revenue from the rentals paid for everything. They never cut us a check once in 10 years. Never once. Bought it, and that was it. The rental paid for everything. And obviously, if we did our job well, put a yield in their hands. Yeah. Right? Generally speaking, to answer that question, If we do somewhere between 3 and 10%, it's a spectacular deal. And that's after owner using it.
Yeah.
That has consistently been achievable in Turks and Caicos.
Wow.
But it depends obviously on your entry price, your
course.
basis, and the sort of occupancy for the year. But for this owner, it wasn't about that. It was about everything else.
Yeah, memories.
So, and he and she left. They got their money back, got some capital appreciation on their real estate, never had to pay on the way. They got to live in a 5-star hotel the whole time they were there, and they left happy. And so if and when we meet buyers of real estate, we can sort of figure out if they have that in their personality, then we know that that's a perfect fit.
Got it.
But if they walk in and say, what's my yield going to be?
Yeah.
I go, it's going to be, we might be disappointed because you're now a hotel owner,
Right.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you got to do this with it, right?
Yeah.
Something happens, the flights stop coming, tourism becomes unattractive, I don't know, there's a terrorist attack, name a thing.
Yeah,
right?
you name it.
All
yeah.
of a sudden it becomes very super variable. So that's kind of how we try to figure out what our ideal buyer is. Now, with that said, to answer the formula question, you buy and you have a 50-50 split with us.
Okay.
That's the market across the country, generally speaking, for condo hotels. For that 50% that we take, we do just about everything. Marketing, housekeeping, maintenance, general administration, management, the works.
wow.
And then you as an owner have the usual fee. You have your HOA dues,
Yep.
you have utilities, you have insurance, those types of things. And then obviously if you have special housekeeping services or anything else, that's charged. So we that's how that split works. And that's basically the model across the country.
Yeah, it seems pretty reasonable. So it's a 50% management fee inclusive of obviously everything. So all hospitality components, people cleaning, linens, everything. And then
But you buy the linens, for example. So if there's anything in the room that is part of the room, furniture,
Got it.
linens, all those things you buy, right?
Yeah.
Artwork, what have you, televisions, all that stuff. You own that, but we will replace the linens regularly, and you
Got it.
contribute to the replacement of those linens just like you would as a hotel owner.
Yep.
So you act like a hotel owner, but you don't have to do anything as the hotel owner. You
Yeah.
basically are waiting for them. We're basically acting as a manager for you.
Wow, that's a great product. So evolving after this 2009, and I want to talk about Rock House, but we can talk about any project you want. Kind of what kind of comes after that? Where are you guys after 2009, and what's the next project, and how do you continue to evolve from there?
Well, it started to get pretty exciting then because we were seen as a legitimate hospitality operator with a clear understanding of this condo hotel model in Turks and Caicos, and we had a marketing machine that was being built. So around this time in 2008, let's stay at 2008 for a minute. The original partner that I had, who was my original boss and became my partner,
Right.
he stepped away. Stepped out of the business because we had now built out the whole Grace Bay Club and decided he was going to go do something else.
Okay.
And I brought in a new partner who was a hospitality professional.
Did he buy him out?
I did. We did.
Okay, got
we
it.
did.
Yep.
Basically, we bought him out. And the person that I brought in, the actual partner that I brought in, was from Singapore, and he was trained in the hospitality world, Ritz-Carlton, Raffles.
Wow.
So he had the pedigree to help us create those processes and those sort of regimens and that discipline in the hospitality side. And he'd been working for us for a while. He was a general manager for a long time, and then I asked him to become a partner.
Interesting.
And so he and I, with others, that was when we started to build the Grace Bay Resorts brand. So at that moment in time, so that's 2008, my original partner stepped away. Now GBR is born where we're starting to grow
Formalize,
GBR,
yeah.
formalize. And in 2009, there was a couple of projects that had gone bust in Turks and Caicos. They couldn't get to the end zone because people just stopped buying real estate.
Mid-construction or built and vacant?
Mid-construction.
Okay.
Mid-construction. There were three or four of them. One was a Lehman project. The other was financed by some European money. This one in particular was financed by a British firm who had a loan with Barclays Bank. And the Barclays took over the property sometime in 2007, I think, 2008. 2009, along comes this really interesting scrap metal guy from the UK.
Okay.
Scrap metal.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that's even a business, but
Yeah,
it is. A
apparently.
big business, and it's all cash. And he is as raw as they get, but he is ready to buy a hotel in Turks and Caicos. So he cuts a deal with Barclays Bank and buys this hotel that's half built. And he calls me and says, will you help me finish this thing? So we said, sure, why not? Let's do that. And so it's a 175 room, beautiful location hotel right next to Sandals, which is called Beaches in Turks and Caicos. It is a spectacular piece of real estate. So he hires us as the brand and the management company and also a co-developer, if you like. We didn't have any money in the deal, but we were actually acting as the like developer.
Like a sweat equity position.
Yeah, exactly.
Operations. Okay, cool.
100%. So we, over the course of the next year, finished out that hotel and opened it. We opened it as the first, what we called fully inclusive luxury hotel. What does that mean? So my partner, the gentleman from Singapore, came up with this catchphrase, and he said, we're going to go to the market, and we're going to call it fully inclusive luxury, Grey Goose at the bar. That was the saying. And,
Cool.
Right? And so it kind of, you said, okay, I got it, right? As opposed to some cheap, of course, booze at the bar. You're going to get some good booze, right? So that was kind of the catchphrase, and it caught on like fire. And so we opened this property in 2010, and we ran it for 2 years. And we started to get some incredible momentum as a fully inclusive luxury hotel. And we put a ton of resources into this and a big team over there. And ultimately, the owner, who was a scrap metal guy who was in the cash business, didn't necessarily have all the patience that was needed for a hotel management.
Can't imagine.
Yeah, exactly. So he decided that he wanted to get rid of the hotel. And so he started talking to Beaches, which is right next door to this property. And Beaches had been watching us because we were doing something they did, but at a high level. So all of a sudden the rate was not 600, it's like 1,002.
Yeah.
Right? And all of a sudden you're getting a luxury customer staying at this. Anyway, long and short of it is
that's good.
Long and short, we ran that hotel, and then in 2012, he sold it.
Okay.
So
to Beaches or
to Beaches.
Okay.
To Beaches. Beaches bought it. And
did he present, not to interrupt, but did he present you the option to, like, was
he
there?
did. Okay. Yeah, but it was a huge ticket. It was a huge ticket, and we didn't have that kind of cash,
cool.
and we needed somebody with a major checkbook, and we just didn't have that at the time. Cool. And I didn't really want to raise the money for that.
Yeah.
It would have been we didn't feel the right product for us to buy.
Yeah, fair.
So we said no thanks, and we wanted to do our own development. So that's kind of what happened in 2000 and 2012. So during that time, we started between 2008 and 2012. The market was generally just fixing up deals like that, and on behind the scenes, we started a division called Private Villa Collection, because the condo market was not going so well. There were some dead bodies, if you like, in the field, and so selling condos became not particularly attractive. So we went and we veered into the residential market and started creating branded communities of residential homes.
Okay, cool.
Because in Turks and Caicos, buying a condo, obviously in a condo project, you are kind of depending upon a lot of different owners to contribute their piece along the way. So if somebody doesn't show up, it could be a little bit 100%. Destabilizing. Yeah. So in a single family home development, we'd start cutting up pieces of land and sell you a home, piece of land and a home, we'd build you a home, and you then in turn agreed to be part of our rental program.
Beautiful.
So we created a rental program for single family homes. And thus began a whole market, huge market for Turks and Caicos, single family homes right now, for branded managed single family homes now in the Turks and Caicos. It's gigantic. And it all started with that particular
How big was that first project?
It was 3 homes.
3?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But it was we called it a micro resort. Mm-hmm. We couldn't get much land, so we just built 3 homes, but they were like $4 or $5 million.
On the oceanfront, or was this?
Right on the oceanfront.
Wow.
Right on the ocean.
Yeah.
5-bedroom homes, $4 million, $4.5 million each. Great customer, and right out of the gate, just boom, they sold right away. And so that began our private villa collection. So we started building more of that while we were doing this veranda project.
Okay.
And then ultimately the veranda sold, and then we'll get to the next stage. But that's what happened between 2008 and 2012.
Wow.
The condo market petered out. Some of these projects got cleaned up. The residential market started to come alive.
But that happened in the States too. There was a huge condo boom even in the States during that period, and then tapered out a ton too.
Yeah.
But the operating model of those resorts was still condotel. It was just you have your house, obviously. So then when do you get into like a larger development like Rock House? Because that seems like there's several different phases to it, a lot of different product type, and very neat. So what's the evolution after? Oh, actually, before I forget. So at the beginning of that last segment, you said our marketing machine began to grow. So what was the marketing machine? If it's proprietary, obviously we don't have to get into it, but how did that evolve? Because selling any condotel, any condo, moving good product, that's obviously super important, especially being a destination. So what did the machine look like?
Well, the machine that I'm referring to was the hospitality marketing.
Oh, got
right?
it.
So filling the hotels with very highly qualified customers, the demographic that we were looking for, which is somebody who's willing to pay you $700, $800, $900 a night for the room stay. So that was driven mostly by that partner from Singapore. And so we started to craft a marketing team. And so he started using the same strategy that I use, which is go into the brands and find some of these talented individuals and bring them into our entrepreneurial world. So for example, the first person that we employed, other than the sales and marketing persons who came from the likes of Raffles or Ritz-Carlton or Four Seasons, if you like, was a revenue manager.
Really?
A revenue manager from Marriott. And she changed our lives because she could sit there in her world and decide, okay, what we're going to price what at. What was our price going to be for this particular room product, and how we're going to get that message out there. And so she was kind of like the manager of the spigot, as we call it. She'd turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, and change our rate. And so we were doing lots of yielding, and that started to change the way we thought about hospitality marketing. But the real estate part was largely driven by the same concept that I described earlier, which was we had a presence in the hotel. The hotel guest was invariably qualified because they were paying big rate to stay in the hotel. Right. And they would pass through our marketing
in the sales
office.
desk, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There would be there'd be a document in the front desk, or there'd be a poster or something in our lobbies, or the sales office was very prominent, so you could just stop in and say, let me see what's this Sotheby's office. You walk in and meet with the real estate professionals, and they could give you the information you need. So that was it was a combination of all of that.
And did they take like a refundable or non-refundable deposit on, like, I want to buy a unit, right? I'm staying in the hotel. I love it. Well, I come by this. Like, how do you get that person to get into the program? Or like, what is the first part of the sales process? Like, is there because it's different state to state, obviously, what deposit rules are, but how did that work down there? Could you take a big chunk of deposit right away?
We couldn't. We could, actually. I shouldn't say we could, and we generally didn't, because what we would do is we would advise the buyer to find a local lawyer. And there was a really strong legal community in Turks and Caicos, Canadian, Irish, Scottish, English, mostly Turks Islanders, who had a very buoyant and highly efficient legal system. So you could find a local lawyer, and we'd then have our lawyer give him those documents. So in Turks and Caicos, understand that the ownership of real estate is different to the U.S. in that there's no title insurance.
Wow.
Your title is effectively guaranteed by the Crown of England. And the way it's guaranteed is your lawyer provides you with basically title insurance. He will do the title search. He or she will do the title search. Right. And it's no different, more complicated than this piece of paper. It's called the land registry system. And the land registry has the name of the title and the name of the property, and it says who owns it. On the back, it shows your encumbrances. And that's it. And so none of us really totally understood it, but in South Africa it's very similar. And so for a buyer, it became simple to just say to the buyer, look, the difference between U.S. and here is that if it's not on the back, it doesn't exist.
Really?
In other words, there's no cloud on title if it's not there.
Wow.
There could be no lien floating out there or something, some bizarre mechanics lien or some other lien. If it's not there, it's not there.
Interesting.
Period. And so ownership of real estate in the country could be easily understood by North American customers. And that's what drove our market. You could arrive, you find a lawyer who's clearly very, very, very educated, very professional, and they could get you comfortable with the process. So we would introduce that process or that lawyer to that particular individual. We'd give them a list of lawyers to talk to. They'd choose one, and ultimately that lawyer would take their deposit. He would execute the contract, and that deposit would be set in trust until such time as one of two things happen. Either we started construction, or we'd already started construction, and so as soon as that contract was signed, that money came over to us.
Oh, wow.
And those monies went into the development of the property.
Wow. So when does Rock House come around, and then what is the best overview of Rock House? Because I want you to be able to detail, because it's super important, because it seems like a big step up, not step up, but a evolution in your development story down there, and probably for the island's development story as well. Okay,
100%.
Can you detail kind of the overview of that project?
I can. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, Rock House, it's the funniest story because it started with a conversation with my wife. And she came to me after one time coming back from South France, right? So she was producing the Today Show, and she would produce the Cannes Film Festival.
Yeah.
in Cannes, right?
Yeah.
And so she was behind the scenes producing these shows, and she would have these interviews with celebrities at this hotel called Hotel de Cap in Antibes. It's a legendary hotel.
Yep.
It's as famous as they get, right? And it sits on this rugged coastline. There is zero beach. It's really, really raw insofar as the way the coastline is designed. But it's an iconic place. And she would have these interviews at that hotel. That was the only place the celebrities wanted to be interviewed because it was like the preeminent hotel. Right?
Cool.
So she said to me, she goes, I think that, this whole infatuation with Grace Bay Beach is overblown. She goes, I think that you could build a hotel like that in this country. That's when it started, right? That particular idea. And I said, and we got into a massive fight about this, okay? Big fight, because I just couldn't see it.
Yeah.
And the reason I couldn't see it is because I knew that we had to sell all this real estate to get the thing going. There was no way we were going to do it unless we could sell the real estate. We couldn't raise the debt.
Of course.
And build a hotel.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Rocky iron shoulders. And so it basically became this debate in our family for a good year and a half, where, and the way I tell it when I go out and speak about this in a public forum is that I think she thought that I didn't like the idea because it wasn't mine.
Was she right?
No, actually. It's a good question. It's a good question. Probably partially so.
Of course.
A little bit. But to be honest, I just didn't think that I could make the pitch. I didn't think that I could convince enough buyers to say, no, we don't need Grace Bay Beach. Right. Let's go someplace different.
Was it that, or was it also that you're so close to it, maybe you couldn't actually see it?
100%. Yeah,
okay.
Definitely. I was very much too close to it. And I wasn't unlike a lot of people. There was this almost like this brainwashing that had occurred that it had to be on Grace Bay Beach or a beach like Grace Bay, otherwise you couldn't sell real estate.
Yeah.
And that was 100% false. But it took a long, long time to get me to figure out how I could make the pitch and what kind of design of a product that we could come up with. So ultimately, 2 years after that first comment, we started traveling around the world. And we went to Amalfi, we went to Greece,
beautiful.
we went to southern France, we went to Capri, and we basically said, this is it. And so the message started to become, and we were like a lot of people, we dreamt about going to Capri.
Yeah, of course.
Dreamt about going to Amalfi or to Greece. That was something we dreamt about doing. And so now all of a sudden, if we can recreate that in some form, 3 hours direct flight from New York City,
100%.
there may be a pitch there. And so that kind of started to form the story. And so 2 years into it, I found this unbelievable piece of land. And also, the land kind of happened because she was driving around the island with our 2-year-old son at the time. And if you're a father, you know that you stick your son in the back of the car and you drive them around, they fall asleep. That's the trick.
Yeah.
And so she would do it or I would do it. And one night she comes back and she goes, I saw this amazing part of the island. That's probably where you should look. And so I started scouring the island and came up and ultimately just completely out of the blue came across this amazing 14-acre site that was for sale.
Whoa.
And I came up with a concept, and we bought this site in 2016. And so began Rock House, based on all that story.
That's crazy. How'd you finance that? Were you able to buy the land in cash at that point? Okay.
Yeah, it was all cash.
Nice. So then you can take
actually,
your time.
Actually, I shouldn't say that. Yet again, a seller carry.
Oh, nice.
Because
Well, yeah,
in Turks and
that's
Caicos,
nice.
right, you got it. It's always helpful if you want to get to the end zone quicker. You get the seller to come into the game. You know the story. You know how real estate works. So we got the seller to carry a little bit. I raised a bunch of equity from the partners that we had been working with since we started Grace Bay.
Sweet.
So I took everybody to this site and said, this is the concept. This is where we're going. And all the story that I just told you, I told them. And I said, this is not just me, just thinking I'm cool and I got some crude plan. I said, this is something that possibly could really attract another audience.
No doubt.
Because, if you're like this, you got to open your eyes. And so she was helpful to me to help me think about it differently. And so we raised the money real fast, bought the land in probably a month, and started going.
What was the initial vision for Rock House? Because there's several phases I want to make sure I'm thinking about the right one. But so there's oceanfront. It seems like there's then it's kind of built into the hill a little bit. Okay. Second layer, and then there's maybe like a shared, maybe not shared pool. It seemed like tennis court or something, but a bunch of different amenities. So it's a great location. What was the plan? Hey, we want to start with condotel. We want to start with primary residence. What was the development model?
Well, it was a hybrid. It was very much a hybrid of the condo hotel model that we've already done. But how can we do? So it was a combination of the residential that I talked about, the condo hotel that we've also had done so far. And so how could we find a hybrid of that? So we shrunk down the residential piece, put it basically on its own site, on its own piece of land, or at least partially shared piece of land. So instead of one house on a piece of land, it was two houses on. Basically, sharing wall. So there's a different set, all kinds of different products on the site. But keep in mind the site's like this. Okay, and so we carved the first layer into this section, and the second layer sat on top of it, so it looks over this, and this looks. So everybody's got a view. And so the site, and so those are the first two phases on those two levers, and the site goes up to here. So we're gonna have a third phase up here. It's gonna look over everything, and you'll see all the way to Cuba from there, right? And maybe not Cuba.
Is that literal? Okay.
Cuba's in the south, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Point is that you can see a long way.
That's right.
And you can see the whole island. And so the idea was, if we created a residential product that was efficient in its style, but felt residential, and more importantly, felt highly organic, and felt like it was so handmade that it just hit your soul right away. So we took the land and we dug out all this beautiful limestone. We set it aside, but before we dug out the limestone, we pulled all the plants out, all the indigenous landscaping, and we created a nursery on the site. We pulled 4,000 plants out of the property and transplanted them in a nursery in the back. This is all indigenous landscape, never been watered by man ever in its history. So this is just all native landscaping growing in limestone. Yeah. Not in soil, but stone. So very hardy plants. So we took these plants and transplanted them, and then we dug into the mountain and brought out these huge chunks of limestone, and then employed local masons to chop them down into bite-sized pieces. And we used that limestone and put it back on the buildings.
Whoa, as exterior?
Yeah, at exterior.
Wow.
So and we actually wrap the walls into the units. So as you're in one of the hotel rooms, you have that local stone coming into the suite. So it feels really, really warm and organic and personal. And so as we started to build these properties, the market started to understand a little bit of what we were doing. But
this is what year?
2000, and let's see, we started selling it in 2018. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 2018, we started selling it, and started building it again a year later in 2019. But the problem was that nobody could understand what we were talking about. So they went through the same anguish that I did with my own wife. Right. I was like, what are you talking about? I don't understand how we can do this. It's not, where's the beach? Where's the beach? Where's the beach? All the time. They kept asking.
The buyers did?
The buyers did.
Okay.
And so did the travel agents, because we wanted to promote it to the travel agents too before we actually finished it, because we want them to sort of know it's coming. So it was a multi-pronged effort. So the good news was that we had a plan to build a private beach. We had a small beach there.
Oh, nice.
We had a small beach there that was natural, but it was tiny. And so what we needed to do was come up with some kind of engineering environment. So we built a jetty, and we expanded the beach, and so the beach became much larger than it was when we first started. Wow. But ultimately, the goal was not to sort of pitch the beach; it was to pitch about something very, very different. And it took a long time to get people to understand what we're talking about.
And then, how did this sales motion work? Because there's no hotel yet at this location, right? So, what was the learning curve or the challenge of getting those contracts done, or people to buy, or was it not?
It was very difficult. It was very challenging. Yeah. So a lot of the original investors bought a unit as well in the early go in. So it was kind of some additional equity going in, and then we just slowly sold it. And there was a period of time, and then keep in mind that we were under construction during the pandemic.
Wow.
So it created a whole new level of complexity where we couldn't work for a while. Nobody was traveling. Yeah. So it was a real tough time. But ultimately, it started to take off sometime around 2021 when we started to sell, started to see some real traction.
Yeah.
But we were still building, so the sale process was very hard because people needed to be reminded over and over and over again what we were trying to do. And I say, remember, and I'm sure that let's just say I'm making a sale, and I'd say, I'm sure you and your wife have dreamt about going to Amalfi, have you not? Oh, we have, yeah. Well, have you been there? Yeah. Well, did you ever talk about the beach when you were there? No.
Yeah.
Of course they did. They talked about the restaurants and the spirit and the culture and the fun and the views and the serenity and just the peacefulness of it. And so we said, well, that's what we're going to do here. And so the first buyers really reaped the benefits of that, because ultimately, once it started to take shape, people went, okay, now we get it. And it started to really be strong. But right out of the gate, the travel community loved it. Loved it.
Really?
Afar magazine voted it #1 hotel in the Caribbean 2 years in a row. Architectural Digest put it on the top hotels to follow in their annual report. Vogue magazine was in there, and it started to hit a market that we hadn't hit in the Grace Bay before. It started to feel a little bit more fashionable.
Wow.
And so you started to get a really young audience, looking cool, feeling cool.
No doubt.
And so we built this restaurant and bar there that just had this sex appeal that was almost impossible to describe.
What's it called? I was reading.
The restaurant's called Vita.
Right.
And the bar is called Cave Bar.
Okay, cool.
Right? It's in a cave. It looks like it's in a cave. Rocks everywhere. It's just really, really authentic. And so from the day we opened, you just see, and it's still to this day, everybody dresses like they're going to church. I mean, what I mean is it's just everyone's wearing their Sunday best.
Nice.
Right? It's just maybe a little more sexy than church, but my point is that they're showing up.
We're taking pride in the product.
Yeah. And so that was new for us, and it's been like that since we opened.
So what is
so hard, if I may say?
Yeah.
She was right.
Right.
She was right.
Make sure we get that in there. Yeah.
She was right.
So where is Rock House now? I think is there still some product left for sale or no?
We have 38 homes in total. We've sold 36.
Got
There's
it.
2 left.
Wow.
And they're just almost finished now.
Did COVID give you any bump after? Because we had this work from home, and I don't know how it correlates to the standard traveler down there, but there was a big kind of like work from, hey, I'm going to go here and live here for 3 months, big hotel kind of presence, and maybe you could attract some buyers out of that process too. How did travel impact sales and product? Was there any positive boost? Because initially, obviously, it was quite a pause on everybody, but was there any positive impact after COVID for Turks?
For sure. I think as a whole, the country saw an incredible boom, like no other country in the Caribbean.
Really?
And it wasn't just for products like we were doing at Rock House. There were other projects that were doing really well. One of the projects that we managed called South Bank had a similar time frame where they were developing at the same time, and they were doing residential. So Rock House, I think that it benefited in that it was one of the few projects that was actually actively being marketed through that time period. But I think, could I say that it spurned real estate sales? I wouldn't say it at that time. People were still being very, very cautious, and they couldn't understand what we were doing still, because it was just just construction everywhere. And if you're building on the side of a hill, it's a disaster. I mean, it just looks like a bomb has gone off the place until the very last minute, and then all of a sudden it starts to look like something. So I would say that where we got the benefit was that the hype around it was so strong that when we finally opened, we started to see just a surge of sales.
Oh, nice.
Right at the end. Because all of a sudden you could see it, you could feel it, you could see what we're talking about. The beach was there, the jetty was there, the restaurant started to take shape. So those who didn't want to take the risk early obviously came in, and then you started to see some price growth.
How did that feel in the development or the owner seat? Because obviously you don't know, like, you see the project formalizing, but you have this global factor that's slowing it down. So I'm sure there's a bit of a sweating that project out to some extent. Then it finalizes along with, macroeconomic trends are now a little bit better too. So was it a tough project to get through in any way?
It was the hardest by a long shot in my entire career.
Wow.
To this day, I say it was the hardest one and still is the hardest, because even now, some people don't understand what we're doing.
Yeah.
And you have to stay there, you have to feel the country, you have to know what we're doing to understand it. I would say that it was a combination of all the factors we've talked about,
Right.
but mostly just trying to get people to understand that there is intrinsic value in having something very, very special that is unique and almost irreplaceable.
Right.
Because I don't think there will ever be another rock house in Turks and Caicos. It was that hard.
Wow.
And to raise the kind of capital and have the kind of support from your equity partners that gave you time to get through that war.
No doubt.
Right? With them giving up, and the lender's not giving up, and everybody's saying, let's just keep driving, keep pushing this, and eventually the thing will turn into a snowball if we keep pushing it down the hill, right?
Yeah.
It'll get the momentum. And that was the beauty of rock houses, that nobody gave up.
Wow.
And so it is a one of a kind. It is a very, very magical place.
Yeah.
And so we think that the next couple of phases will just add to that. So ultimately, when it's done, it'll probably add another 30 keys over time. A wellness facility, another restaurant, perhaps a second jetty. We'll grow the beach, and then all of a sudden you'll have a property there that has enormous longevity.
Wow.
Right now it does, but we need a little bit more, a few more keys in the system.
Wow. What about that was the most, I know we kind of talked on a couple factors there, but what was specifically you think the hardest moments or conversations maybe with capital partners, like what led to the most pressure in that deal? Or was it just, hey, no one's buying our vision yet, and hey, no one's really buying any real estate too? Like, was there any kind of loans maturing? Was it like the equity partners getting impatient? Like, what made it so painful?
Every one of those things. Everyone, except for the equity partners. I don't think that they ever, if they were impatient, they didn't express it. Because we had purposely created a team of equity partners that were high net worth family office money that have a different mindset to a private equity firm. So we were able to talk this stuff through and say, this is how we're going to deal with this problem. And insofar as we had this enormous trust between us that we were going to work through it, and the challenges that we were having were not directly attributable to, say, me or somebody in my organization.
Right.
It was just the market factors. I think we were able to overcome it. We did have some maturing debt, so we had to replace that, and that was challenging, but we were able to do that. So it was a combination of everything you've just described. All those things kind of piled on, and ultimately we had to raise more equity, had to raise more debt. We had to probably sell some real estate cheaper than we wanted to.
It's all part of it.
No surprise, any of that, right? Yeah. But it was all worth it. Because this property in 10 years is going to be irreplaceable. It already is.
Absolutely.
So, but I probably wouldn't do it again.
Yeah. It's the making of every great project, it seems, that story. Before getting to the point, because I think this will provide some level of detail for how difficult it is, and then how seriously you guys take quality. But you saw the prep sheet. But one thing two things that are super fascinating that I think differ incredibly maybe from development in the States is how hard is the construction component, because there are obviously no materials nearby, and also the site work or maybe utilities because it's a different country. I don't know how that operates. And then the second part to that, and maybe if you want to weave them together, is how important is picking quality materials and like that design? I've read through the brochure for the for the point, I don't want to misquote, but it was like this Italian timber kitchen and all of these really exquisite products that go in, which manufacture the end result, which is this priceless real estate that you craft for people. So what pride do you take in materials? And then I'm sure that leads to an even more challenging way to source them. So how does that all kind of weave into the development of all of these deals here?
Well, firstly, I think starting from the Italian crafted kitchens example, right?
Yeah.
We obviously have a high-end customer who's paying us top dollar for first-class real estate.
No doubt.
So we have to pick and choose a couple of very key brands that we know now can deliver on the promise. So in this particular example, we have Scavolini kitchens.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
The appliances the refrigerators are Sub-Zero, whereas years ago it used to be GE.
Right.
The appliances in the kitchen would be Miele, right? So brands that you would recognize. I would tell you though, 10 years ago, we wouldn't have touched any of those things.
Based on cost?
No, because we didn't have anybody who could fix them.
Right.
So the selection of products is invariably associated with our ability to deliver on maintenance.
That makes sense.
Because owners they get so angry and the TV doesn't work or the fridge isn't working or the whatever, the microwave, just these. And if you can't fix them right away, which you basically can in a big city.
Then you have a huge service issue.
Drives people mad.
Okay.
And I paid all this and I can't get my fridge to work. Right? So over time, we were able to develop the serviceability of our products. But generally speaking, in terms of raw materials, we keep things very natural and we keep it very simple. So as an example, if there is something new in the market, some new innovation or some sort of electronic gizmo that kind of sounds cool and it works really well in, I don't know, Tennessee or Texas or Idaho, we probably won't use it in Turks because there won't be anybody who knows how to fix it. And it's probably going to go wrong because, and I hate to be cynical, you get a little cynical over time because you're just trying to keep people happy.
Or realistic.
Right,
yeah,
realistic,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
better.
Yeah.
And so we wouldn't necessarily deploy those products because we want our customers to be happy. And so
minimizing the maintenance or service risk almost.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
And so with things like, and most of the challenges are driven by salt, humidity, heat. Right? Those three things. Especially, and we're really focused on stuff outside.
Yeah.
And if you can't manage what you're having, if you start getting too newfangled outside, you're just going to face all kinds of problems. So we keep design simple. Even though we want it to look good and feel good, generally speaking, we try to keep it as simple as possible.
Got it.
So so tiles, timbers, those types of things. I mean, timbers generally it's all pressure treated, or lots of hardwoods. We try to avoid those if not too much of those because they don't last as long as they would if you have it in, say, Tennessee. A hardwood that you get from Brazil is going to last a lot longer in Tennessee than it does on the coast of Turks and Caicos. So we're very careful about that. Now, in terms of the logistics and the process of building, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? We have all these positives, and the positives are this. We have this tapestry of cultures that work in the Caribbean that are so fascinating to watch and to spend time with because they all come with their own set of their sort of own personalities and their cultures and their way of speaking and communicating, and they all come with a certain level of skill set. So, for example, the Haitian community is huge in Turks and Caicos.
Really?
They do all the tiling, and they're excellent at it.
Cool.
And if they do a room and they see that it's wrong, they'll redo it without even telling you. I've had it happen a million times. They're so proud of their work, right? The Jamaican community, very, very strong in the Turks and Caicos. Very good with their timber work. Same with St. Lucian. Same with the Dominicans. Not a Dominican community work very heavily in the trades of engineering, electrical, air conditioning, plumbing. Anyway, the point is that there is an incredible pride of work in the Caribbean. And so it may take a little longer, but you end up with a product and you think, how is this possible? Because you don't see, you can't immediately tell that these guys have that skill set, but they just put tons of elbow grease in it, right? They really work hard at it. And at the same time, there's no unions. So these guys work whenever they want. You go on the site on Sunday, they've got 10 tilers out there finishing a house that's supposed to be ready by Monday. Not wait until Monday. You're going to do it on Sunday. Right? So that happens in the Turks and Caicos, and that happens in the Caribbean generally, but certainly for us. But I think the challenge is the infrastructure behind all those young men and women who have to ensure the logistics and the quality selection of the product selection and getting that product into the country because we import everything. The only thing that we don't import in the construction trade is concrete block and concrete and cement.
Okay. And limestone, apparently.
Yeah, but even that, I would tell you, well, they wouldn't do that again because we thought it would be cheaper.
Yeah.
It was more expensive. We could have imported cut stone for less than doing what I just described.
Wow.
Because the hand work was just so laborious.
Wow.
They had to cut it into it was like a jigsaw puzzle. So
that's crazy.
A tremendous amount of labor. But they did an amazing job. So I would say that the construction industry is very, very professional in Turks and Caicos, predominantly managed by British engineers, civil engineers, quantity surveyors, architects. structural engineers, mechanical engineers. And so we have that industry has flourished over the past many years. But generally speaking, the industries are tourism,
Yep.
real estate, construction, in that order. Real estate and construction, vice versa. Sometimes.
3 employment sector, the biggest.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think this is a good segue to get to the point. So this is the most current project or active project. It still seems that it's sold out. There's 75% through sales? Okay. Do you want to give an overview on the point and kind of what led you guys to this project? Now, it also seemed like there was a neat acquisition story for this deal, too.
Yeah, there was. Yeah. It was fun in the true sense of just be in the market long enough and build relationships. It's basically the story of real estate for many, many people, I think. In this particular case, this hotel was built by a Swiss family in 1999, and it's a condo hotel.
Okay.
It's a 35-unit condo hotel that sits on about as good a piece of real estate as you're ever going to find. Okay. It is spectacular, right? It's only about a couple thousand feet down the beach from Grace Bay Club, our flagship.
Got it.
You walk there in 20 minutes on the beach, barefoot, and you get there. And this owner and I met in 2003, so 21 years ago. And over the course of the year, the next few years, we developed Grace Bay Club. And then in 2008, I approached him and I said, we would be a great steward for your property if you would sell it, because I knew he owned land next to it. Yeah. Same story, right? And I said, we would be a great steward for you. We now understand what you've done. We understand the legacy that you're trying to keep. And so I kind of danced with him for a while, he and his family. And it took 10 years for him finally to sign a deal. We talked, and then we stopped talking, and then we talked again, and we talked, and we signed a contract 3 years in a row. And for 3 years, he kept siding against it. So he signed, no thanks. Signed, no thanks, and finally we get to the end zone in 2018, and we were able to persuade him. And my pitch wasn't so much about the money; it was about us trying to ensure the legacy, and protect the staff, because there was a big employment.
That's what was most important to him.
Definitely, no question.
And do you think that's why you hadn't earned the trust of, hey, we're going to not overbuild, or we're going to keep your people? He didn't trust you enough yet on that he kept backing out? Do you think that's what it was correlated to? Maybe not that linear.
I don't know. To be honest with you, it was a very wealthy family from Switzerland, and they probably just couldn't let go of their firstborn kind of thing.
Sense.
I don't know, but I think that ultimately the country started to change, and you started to see the codes in the country change. And what happened was sometime around 2000 let's say 12, 13, 14, somewhere around that, they changed the codes for heights in the country. And the maximum height up until that point was a 7th floor building. And then they changed it to 12. And they allowed a development where now there's a Ritz.
Substantial change.
Yeah, and so now there's a Ritz-Carlton there that's very much a Ritz like you'd see anywhere else, right? And so that kind of discouraged him. And he said, you know what, I think that the landscape's changing enough that it's time for me to go. I can't ensure the legacy in exactly the way I want it. The world is changing. So that finally was the trigger where he said, okay, it's time to go. And so he sold the property, and we made basically a handshake that we would not overbuild the site. We also made a handshake that we retain all the staff, insofar as they were wanting to stay. And we did. All those things we did. And so the project, what you see is, we have a 9.5 acre site which has entitlements for 400 and some odd rooms.
Whoa.
We're building 145.
To keep that handshake alive.
Exactly. And to keep the neighborhood feeling high end,
Absolutely.
feeling quiet and intimate and special, but also understanding that the economics have changed dramatically. So as an example, we initially said we won't build more than 6 floors. Okay. Then the world shifted dramatically. Construction costs went up by about 30% in the last 5 years across the world, but certainly in our country. And so we found a happy medium where the building went up by a floor, so it's a 7th floor building, which was the max up until that other building that happened. And then in the site adjacent to it, which is considered largely in the back, is a residential grove of 16 beautiful 2-bedroom homes with their own private pool, their own private garden.
Casitas, is that what?
Casitas, that's right, yeah. And those are going to be hugely popular. And those are emanated off of a property that we know in St. Bart's called Ile-de-France.
Oh, cool.
A Cheval Blanc, which is a Louis Vuitton brand, own that property, and they have these beautiful 2-bedroom homes that are basically sandwiched in the back of a valley. No ocean view, no water views. You just have these beautiful gardens, private spaces, and families love them.
Wow.
Well, the key to the casitas and a product like the casitas is that you have to create a link between those and the hotel.
Okay.
They have to be one and the same.
Yep.
You're a casita guest or you're a condo guest, it's the same. It's just a different looking product.
Right.
You want room service? We bring it to you. You want to go to the beach? You go to the beach. You want to go to this pool, that pool, that pool, this spa, that, wherever you want to go. You are an owner or guest, they're all the same. It's just you just don't have an ocean view. But what you do is you can escape to your little private haven.
That's right.
And it's going to be really popular.
Yeah.
And so for the owners in that neighborhood, it was in my opinion, in 10 years, they're going to think that a dream came true because we didn't do what the code allowed us to do.
Right.
And I think that's really important to our ethos generally.
Important to that deal too, being a good deal maker on, sticking to it. So it's 56 residences total, right? The point, is that right? That's what I
There
read.
are 52, 56, that's correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And then 16 of them are the casitas, and then the rest is
Condominium.
Got it. Okay.
There's a 7-story building with 42 units in it. So it's actually 58.
Wow.
42 and 16.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is remaining left, or what's still available for sale? And like, what is the project range from? I think I maybe read an old filing. It was like 2-bedroom starting, like maybe $2 million, all the way up to penthouses at 11. So there's a wide swath of product. So what is remaining for sale there?
There are, in the 42-unit condo building, we have 8 units remaining.
Wow.
For sale. You cannot buy them right now because we basically decided to stop the sales. It was happening a little too quick, and so we held. We want construction to start, and then we'll re-release.
Okay.
So there are 8 units available in the condominium building, and in the casitas there are 6 out of 16. So
Wow.
yeah,
Good demand there too.
yeah, it's been strong. So what's left is mostly 2 and 3 bedroom units. But actually, there's a couple 4 bedrooms as well. The penthouse is sold virtually immediately.
Wow.
Because we had that market, and so there are 2 penthouse level units available still, and then the rest are 2 and 3 bedrooms.
Wow. So it's a 9.5 acre site. Is there any plan? Is this all that will ever be built there, or you're saying there's still room to maybe develop and still honor the handshake, or is it done after
that's
this?
It. Well,
Wow,
the 9.5 acres will be absorbed by 2 acres for the condominium building, another 3 acres by the casitas, and the rest will be hotel amenities.
Wow. Okay.
Lobbies for spas, fitness centers, kids facilities, general common areas, restaurants, bars, back of house.
Where does the whole project stand now? So it's under construction, and when?
Not yet. We'll
Okay.
start construction any day now.
Okay. Cool.
Hopefully today.
When will product be delivered? Do you think? What's the kind of the ideal goal? 26 or something?
Yeah, 27. Yeah,
Okay,
27. Cool. We'll probably start in earnest in January. We probably, with any luck, we'll have a digger on the site sometime the next couple of days. And we'll start a little bit of work, and then we'll shut down for the Christmas, New Year period, and then restart in January. And so we have a 30-month time horizon to build, 32 months roughly. So we're in the middle of, roughly, middle of 27, early to middle of 27.
Over time, how has demand for just general travel evolved over from your early days till now? Like, I assume that helps move the product immensely, but how did flight schedules change? I'm probably sure maybe just a couple flights coming in, or there multiple carriers? Like, how much has travel and demand to the island changed since your early days there?
It's been exponential. I would tell you there are a couple of key milestones that happened. The ones that I remember very, very vividly was in 2000, I want to say it was 6 or 7, U.S. Air started showing interest to come from U.S. Air, which now obviously no longer, was coming in from Charlotte. They said they wanted to bring in a flight from Charlotte. And so they came and stayed at our hotel, and we wined them, dined them, and showed them and introduced them to the various individuals in government. And that happened, and so that was a big deal. But really the major change was when JetBlue came in 2011. And up until that point, the U.S. Airs and the American Airlines usually tried to cut a deal with the government to where they'd subsidize seats.
Oh, interesting.
JetBlue came with a more innovative approach, and they said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring a direct flight from JFK daily, but we need you to help us market it. So you being the private sector and the government. So the private sector and the government, and this is the beauty of the Turks and Caicos. It's so small that we have agility that allows us to do things together that shift the market really fast. And the pandemic is another story, but we can say that for another time. But in this particular case, they came to us and said, we need $1 million for marketing to put this thing on the map. We'll put up half the money, you put up the half the money. And we did it like overnight. The government said, we'll take a $400,000 check, and the private sector and the government put up the money, and we basically gave it to JetBlue and said, hit the ground running. Virtually the next day, you had a banner across that overpass for the air train that goes over JFK, and it's a huge banner. It must have been, 100 yards long, and it said, fly to Turks and Caicos, JetBlue.
No way.
And it was there for months. Overnight, it was full. Overnight. And basically within a month, Delta introduced a JFK flight, American introduced a JFK flight, and United from Newark. So we had, at one point in time in 2011, we had 4 flights a day flying direct from JFK or from New York City, the New York City area. Yeah. That didn't last for too long, but we did have that for a long period of time. And so that just changed the world. All of a sudden, you knew about it, not because our ads were on a taxi somewhere or because you saw it in some brochure or some Condé Nast magazine. You saw it in a banner that the airlines were generating. Wow. Or some kind of marketing that the airlines were doing. And so it just started, the momentum was massive from that moment on.
I wonder it would be neat to see like a graph of the correlation in between real estate prices down there and increased air carriers, because it seems like it correlates pretty good.
No doubt.
In lightly wrapping up, is there any project that we missed? I know we covered so many, but I want to give you a chance. If there's any, even it can be a small deal from earlier in South Africa, but is there anything else? And there doesn't need to be. I just want to make sure we didn't miss any keystone deal in your life. Is there any other project or story that you didn't get to tell that you think is kind of critical in your life or in Grace Bay?
Well, I think in Grace Bay, because we have become a multi-pronged company, we have a very, very strong emphasis on hospitality management. And so now developers are coming to us for, like I described in the veranda situation, and saying, we develop, but we don't want to run hotels. It's not necessarily our strong suit. And so in this example, we just now opened a property called South Bank. Cool. You read about it in Turks and Caicos. Yep. It is a game changer in the country, and we are the operator. Wow. We're not the developer, but it's a local family that's been there for generations, built this property. It is a coastal, sort of a lagoon, marina, residential community, really first class, 90 homes. 90 units in total over time, and we just opened that in November, and we're starting to get some traction with that. So that's something that we're really proud of, because that developer came to us as opposed to the other way around. Right. So we want a partner who can help us turn this into a real vibrant place. So working on that, and obviously for us, the next phases of Rock House are really critical. Yeah. Really excited about that. It's kind of ours to mess up, as they say. Right. But we think we've got a great opportunity there. I think deals that I haven't talked about, I don't know. I think I've covered them all.
I think we've talked about a lot. Yeah. In wrapping up, before closing questions, what's most important to you in the management business, right? Because management, especially a condotel, heavily operational. Also, you have your partner in the deal is the homeowner or the condotel owner. What is super important? What do you take super seriously when it comes to managing, or now being this management partner? Because management for this product is this blend between logistics, and you mentioned your pricing partner that you hired earlier. I think you said maybe from Marriott, but you have all these variables that get wrapped into condotel operations and management. Like, what is super important for you in guest experience or just in management overall?
I think that ultimately, if you can remember that the relationships matter on all levels, that's how you succeed in the condo hotel model. The first and foremost, you got to take care of your employees. We start there. If we can create an environment where employees feel like there's upward mobility and there's opportunity, and that's how I think our brand has flourished in the Turks, where we've been able to create opportunities that are outside just one hotel. There are multiple hotels. Second, creating these relationships with your owners that they feel like they're partners, not just a commodity.
Sure.
Their home is part of the hotel. They helped you to build the hotel.
Yeah.
And therefore, if they have a question, you have to answer that question. They're not just, it's very important that they feel like you're making decisions that are in their best interest. And finally, I think just being present, creating a personalization to the experience is very, very important in the boutique industry at the independent level.
No doubt. So
could we call Four Seasons, and would they take over our brand? I don't know, maybe. Or an Amman or a Oberoi, or I name a brand, right? Maybe, but what we chose to do instead is affiliate with leading hotels of the world, preferred hotels, small luxury hotels, and they help us with the messaging. And the messaging is, this is a world-class place. It's going to be independent in its style. It's going to have all the sort of the qualities that you expect from a five-star hotel, but it's not going to have the sort of the brand the more homogenization of the branding. And so I think ultimately it's about the personalization of the experience.
I love it. That makes sense. Yeah. Last couple questions for you. So what are you and the team focused on kind of right now and then forward looking just to next year? Like what's top of mind? Anything new, pressing right now that you're spending your time on?
Our biggest challenge, what we're focused on, is how to accommodate the growth. As these resorts get built out and the properties start to mature, we see our employee base going from 950 to probably, as the Point gets finished, Rock House gets its next phases, we see our employee base going from 950 to up to 1,200 to maybe 1,500. Where are we going to bring those people from? How are we going to house them? How are we going to train them? How are we going to ensure that we have the best in class employee services? We want to be an employer of choice. That is the number one goal of ours. The second is to ultimately grow our revenue stream. This year it's probably got 120 million of top line. We think that's going to be north of 200 million when we finally get to this place that we want to get to. Those sort of 1,200 to 1,500 employees. Those really are our main targets. How do we make that happen?
Right.
And make it happen efficiently and successfully and healthily, because it's not easy. That kind of growth can hurt. So I think just focusing on those things is our main goal.
Especially solving that challenge on an island makes it a little harder too.
Yeah.
Okay, so this may be a little bit adjacent to that, but we talked about your time in the States, South Africa, in here. Is there any product type you haven't built? Is there any, asset class you haven't built in? Is there any service that you don't have? And is there any market that you're not in that you would like to be in at some point in the future? Any one of those three: service, product, or market that you've never done that you may have the itch to do at some point?
Wellness.
Wow. On site.
Like on Rock House.
Wow.
So we have an ideal setting. We've got a conceptual design for a wellness destination, if you like, on the third phase of Rock House, that sits on the highest promontory of the site. Yeah. That could be a world-class situation where you have this space that's within the confines of the resort, but it's its own little space. Yeah. And so the idea of having a wellness zone there, where it has its own, wellness, so various components, relaxation, Pilates, meditation,
absolutely,
spa, fitness, its own swimming pool, its own sort of dining, sort of
nutrition
menu,
component,
nutrition, the whole thing. We have lots of customers who are saying, if you can create that, we will create packages to come. So they come in groups, right? And you can create that environment. We think that that's a huge, step for the future. And this is an ideal location, because when you're going on wellness, you don't have to be at the beach. Mm-hmm. You want to be in a space where you can get to the beach, but you kind of want to go to where you can relax, and you want to calm your mind, and you kind of want to bring your stress levels down. And that's what we think we can do with that particular. That's certainly one of our targets.
It seems like it would be a pretty attractive amenity also if there's a membership component to your.
Definitely.
It grows like more product or more service for the family to do when they're there too.
Definitely.
That's interesting. All right, last question. Mark, you've been in this business for a long time and you've succeeded immensely. Who along the way was important in your journey in growing or learning, just in real estate development, just as a person, however you want to answer it, that's up to you. But who were the key characters in your life that you learned a lot from?
Ooh, I mean, there's a lot of people, right?
Course, always is.
In everybody's career, there's so many people that have been instrumental. I thought about that question. If you ask it, I would say that firstly, the first that comes to mind is my father. Mm-hmm. He was a great entrepreneur, and he was always the kind of he is a person to sort of give me thoughts and help me think through problems. Really, really solid when it came to, and he wasn't a developer, he was just a business person, but he helped me think through problems and think through people. And I think that was the first part of my life, but in the last 15 years, I would say without a doubt, it's been my wife.
Absolutely. And we can thank her for Rockhouse,
definitely.
Too. Yeah.
She is exceptionally smart, smarter than anyone I know, and she just helps me think about problems from a different angle and look at situations from a different sort of mindset, and has helped us to sort of certainly helped me to grow in our business. So I would probably say those two.
I love it.
There's more, but those are the two.
I think that's a great place to wrap. Did we miss anything about
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm glad that you asked. I'm glad that you allowed me to do this.
This was great. I loved having you on the show. Appreciate it, Mark. Great to meet you.
Thank you.
Yes,
You
sir.
too.